being asked here. The first question is, does God exist? That's a question about facts. Is something actually the case? The second question, and that's the question that was asked in the title. In the body of the question, there's a different question being answered, which is it rational to believe in God? That's not quite the same thing. Something can be true even if it's not rational to believe in it. And something can be rational or reasonable to believe in it, even if it's not true. For example, suppose that there are aliens living on the moon. It's possible. Would it be rational for me right now to believe that? No, it would not. Even though it's true, it wouldn't be rational because I don't have good enough evidence to believe that, even if it's true. Now, if I were to go there and meet the aliens, etc., that would be a different story. But right now, true, but not rational to believe. And on the other hand, suppose that my parents are not really my parents and I was adopted. Is it rational for me right now, with the evidence I have, to believe that my parents really are my birth parents? Well, yes, it is, because they've told me, they've shown me through our relationship that I trust them, I look like them, etc. And so even though it's not true, well, I don't have the evidence that it's not true. It's rational for me to believe it. Okay, so let's talk about God. For the first, so I want to focus on that second question because I think that's the trickier one. Well, there's two ways that you can show that a belief is unreasonable or irrational. You can show that it's unreasonable in terms of its content. So that would mean saying that belief in God is inherently inconsistent, either logically inconsistent with itself or inherent with some obvious fact. So, for instance, some philosophers have tried to show that the existence of God is logically incompatible with the existence of evil and suffering. Others have tried to show that the concept of God itself is incoherent through paradoxes of omnipotence and things like that. The question is like, can God make a rock so big he can't lift it? That kind of thing. And without going into too much detail, I personally don't find those arguments convincing for the simple reason that it's really hard to prove a negative. You know, it's one thing to say that evil, for instance, is evidence that God doesn't exist. I think that's perfectly reasonable. It's another thing to say that the existence of evil and the existence of God are logically contradictory. That's hard to prove. Okay, since the content argument is so tough to pull off, people also criticize belief in God in the basis of someone's grounds or reasons for holding religious beliefs. Basically, it's not that the idea of God is crazy, it's that nobody has good enough evidence for it, right? If you could provide scientific evidence for God's existence, that would be reasonable, but what's unreasonable, the argument goes, is to take things on faith without evidence. Now, I think this line of criticism is much more promising, but ultimately, I don't think it works either. The problem is that every time a philosopher finds a way to show that belief in God is unreasonable, they accidentally end up showing that some other very normal kind of belief is also unreasonable. In other words, they bite off more than they can chew. So, for example, you often hear people say that faith in God is unreasonable because it's unreasonable or irrational to believe things without scientific proof or the evidence of the senses. But we all believe many things without sense evidence. For instance, I believe that I'm my father's son. I believe that Paris is the capital of France. I believe that what my phone app tells me is the contents of my bank account actually is. I mean, you couldn't function in society without these non-sensory, non-scientific beliefs. And so that doesn't seem to work. You might add, well, maybe it's irrational to believe without scientific or sense evidence or testimony from trustworthy witnesses. But many religious people would say that faith is belief on the basis of testimony from God, from prophets, and so on. So by that definition, again, faith is perfectly reasonable. Or if you say it's not, you have to say a bunch of other things are also unreasonable or irrational. Now, this doesn't mean that religious belief is true. It just means that it's reasonable. It's not crazy. You can be an atheist and think it's false, but still reasonable to believe in God. After all, I'm a religious believer, and I think some forms of atheism are, to some extent, reasonable. Thank you.